Imagine a world where your thoughts can actually be read. I'm not just talking about your conscious commands, but your plans, your intentions, even your mistakes before you even realize you've made them. Now, this sounds like pure science fiction, I know. But thanks to this incredible fusion of artificial intelligence and neurotechnology, that future is arriving way faster than you can think. And it all starts with a story that honestly sounds like magic, but is very, very real.
That's not a line from a movie. That's a real person, Nancy Smith, describing what it was like to play a piano with her mind. Her words, they just perfectly capture the magic, the sheer power, and yeah, the really profound questions at the very heart of this revolution. So let's talk about Nancy Smith. Back in 2008, a car crash left her paralyzed from the neck down. She then volunteered for a clinical trial where something called a brain-computer interface, or BCI for short, was implanted in her brain. And just by imagining playing a keyboard she saw on a screen, she could create music again. Now, here's where it gets really wild. The reason it felt like the piano was playing itself, the AI-powered system wasn't just reading her command to play a note. No, it got so good at reading her brain that it could predict her intention to play a note. It was blurring the line between thought and action. So that brings us to the core tech that makes all this possible. I mean, how exactly do you decode not just what someone is doing, but what they're about to do? Well, it all starts with understanding what a BCI actually is. So at its simplest, a BCI is basically a bridge between your brain and the digital world. But where you build that bridge makes all the difference. For years, the focus was on one very specific part of the brain. And this, right here, is the real breakthrough. See, early BCIs, they tapped into the brain's action department, the motor cortex. But the new frontier, which is where Nancy's BCI was also placed, is the strategy department, the posterior parietal cortex. This is where we plan, where we form intentions. Tapping into this area is like getting a sneak peek at the CEO's meeting notes before the company-wide memo even goes out. It's a game changer. And the secret sauce that makes this all work? It's AI. The signals coming from these deeper parts of the brain are incredibly complex, just a ton of noise. It's the AI algorithms that can sift through all that chaos and find the meaningful patterns, the actual signals of preconscious thought. AI is the engine that's turning mind reading from a cool concept into a real capability. Now, as this technology is taking off, it's splitting into two very, very different paths. We're seeing two distinct worlds of neurotech emerge, and they have completely different rules and completely different risks. And this table just lays it out perfectly. On one side, you've got clinical BCIs. We're talking surgically implanted, highly regulated medical devices made to help patients. The big risk there is all about surgical safety. But then, on the other side, you have consumer neurotech, wearable headbands, headphones, stuff for wellness or productivity. And that market, it's a regulatory Wild West, where the main risk is all about your data. These consumer devices, they usually use something called EEG. It basically uses little sensors to pick up your brain's electrical activity, your brain waves. So it can read general states, like if you're focused or anxious. They're designed to be sleek. And just like in the clinical world, AI is making their noisy data more and more reliable. And this stuff is going mainstream. Tech giants like Apple are already patenting this kind of tech for products you might be using every single day pretty soon. And that brings us right to the central dilemma. When a technology this powerful moves from a super-controlled clinical setting into the totally unregulated consumer market, what happens to our most private space? What happens to our own minds? To really get the scale of this, just think about this number, 90. Over the last 2 decades, only about 90 people in the entire world have gotten one of these invasive clinical BCI implants like Nancy Smith's. It's a tiny, incredibly carefully monitored group. But then you look at the consumer side, and thousands of people are already strapping these devices on. There's no clinical trial, no ethical review board, nothing. And this is where the concern among ethicists really starts to ramp up. Neuroethicist Marcello Ianca just puts it perfectly. We already live in a world where every click, every like, every place we go is being bought and sold. Now imagine adding your brain's raw reactions, your attention, your emotions, to that mix. That's like giving steroids to the data economy. It's a whole new level of personal data. So this really boils down to two fundamental dangers. First, you've got mental privacy, the risk that the raw data of your mind could be collected, sold, and used against you. But the second one is even deeper. cognitive autonomy. This is the risk that the tech doesn't just read your mind, it actually starts to change it.
And look, this isn't some hypothetical, far-off fear. A recent analysis looked at 30 of these consumer neurotech companies and found their privacy policies are already wide open. The huge majority of them give themselves the right to do pretty much whatever they want with your brain data, and that includes selling it.
So as we're heading into this new era, the ultimate question really becomes one of control. As that line between our minds and our machines gets blurrier and blurrier, who's really in the driver's seat? Okay, get ready for this. Here's a mind-bending example from recent research. A BCI can detect something in your brain called an error signal. This signal pops up when you're about to make a mistake, like clicking the wrong button. But it happens fractions of a second before you're consciously aware of it. The machine literally knows you've messed up before you do.
This leads to a really fascinating practical question, right? Should the device just go ahead and correct that mistake for you? I mean, it would be faster, more efficient for sure, but it would be taking an action on your behalf based on a signal from your brain that you weren't even aware of.
And that just blows up into this much bigger, more philosophical question. Where is that line? When does helpful assistance cross over into subtle control? When does a tool that helps you think start to, well, think for you?
Now, experts are grappling with this right now. One of the most promising ideas out there is to establish what's called a fiduciary duty for these neurotech companies. That would legally require them to act in your best interests, the same way a doctor has a duty to their patient. It would force them to put your well-being over their own profits.
And this quote from ethicist Nida Farhani really captures the new focus of this whole debate. The first fear was always about data privacy, what happens if your brain data gets stolen. But the bigger worry now is about what's happening on the device itself, how the AI is actively shaping your thoughts and your communication in real time. So we end with the biggest question of all, the one this technology really forces us to ask. As we integrate these powerful AI systems more and more deeply with our own minds, we're not just creating new tools. We might just be creating a new version of ourselves. And we have to decide, starting right now, who or what we want that to be.